The American childcare system of the 1970s consisted of taking a 13-year-old girl you had met twice, handing her your 3 children, your house keys, the contents of your refrigerator, and a $5 bill, and driving away for 6 hours without calling once. And this was not negligence. This was the entire arrangement, and it worked for about 30 years, and then it stopped, and almost nobody has ever sat down and articulated what we lost when it ended. Because what we lost was so completely ordinary that it never occurred to anyone that it was a thing in the first place. The Babysitter of 1976 was a member of an institution that, by the standards of 2026, was so structurally insane that the entire arrangement is now either illegal, uninsurable, or grounds for an investigation by Child Protective Services, and almost nobody under 45 has any idea that it ever existed. For the next 30 minutes, we are going to go inside that arrangement. 30 specific things that every American babysitter did in the 1970s that were completely normal at the time, and that would today result in arrest, lawsuit, social media outrage, the firing of any agency that allowed it, or the immediate intervention of authorities. We are not exaggerating. We are going to be specific. And by the end of this video, the last one, number 30, is going to explain why the entire system collapsed, and it is not the reason you think. Stay until the end. Let's go back. Number 1. She was 13 years old. The babysitter your parents hired in 1976 to watch you and your 2 younger siblings on a Saturday night was, very often, a 13-year-old girl from down the street. Not 17, not 16, 13. She had been a child herself 18 months earlier. She was now, somehow, considered fully qualified to be the sole adult presence in a house with 3 children for the duration of an entire evening. Your parents handed her the keys, gave her the phone number of the restaurant, and drove away. Today, leaving a 13-year-old in charge of younger children for an extended period of time is, in many jurisdictions, considered itself a form of neglect, and many states now have minimum babysitting ages of 14, 15, or 16, codified into law specifically because the casual system of the 1970s was deemed unacceptable. Number 2. There was no background check, no certification, no training, and no agency. The hiring process for a 1970s babysitter consisted, in its entirety, of your mother asking her friend down the street if her daughter was available on Friday night. That was it. There was no Red Cross certification, there was no CPR training, there was no fingerprint check, there were no online reviews, there was no agency to call. There was nothing between your mother's friendly inquiry and the moment the girl walked through your front door and assumed total responsibility for your life. The modern babysitting industry has built an entire architecture of certifications, agencies, app-based vetting, and background screening, all of which exist specifically because the casual neighborhood referral system that worked for 50 years is now considered too risky to use. Number 3. She smoked in the house. The 1970s babysitter, who was 16 years old, lit a Marlboro Light approximately 4 minutes after your parents pulled out of the driveway, opened the kitchen window 6 inches, sat on the kitchen counter, and smoked 4 cigarettes over the course of the evening. The smoke was in the curtains. The smoke was in your hair when you woke up. Your parents found the ashtray she had improvised from a saucer, said nothing, and rehired her the next Saturday. The babysitter who smoked in the house in 1976 was so ordinary that nobody thought about it. Today, this single behavior, on its own, would end her career and possibly result in legal consequences. Number 4. She drank your parents' beer. After the kids were in bed, the 1970s babysitter went into the refrigerator, took out one of your father's Schlitz cans, drank it slowly while watching television, and your father, who was a methodical man, knew exactly how many beers were in the refrigerator when he had left, and knew exactly how many were in the refrigerator when he returned, and said nothing because the missing beer was understood to be part of the implicit compensation structure of teenage babysitting in 1976. Today, a babysitter consuming any alcohol while watching minors is a fireable offense at minimum and a criminal charge at maximum. Number 5. Her boyfriend came over. At some point around 9:30 in the evening, after the kids were in bed, the babysitter's boyfriend, a 17-year-old in a denim jacket, appeared at the back door, was let in quietly, and spent the rest of the evening with the babysitter on your living room sofa, watching the late-night movie on Channel 8, eating the chips that were supposed to be for next weekend's barbecue, and engaged in activities of varying levels of physical intimacy that your parents, when they got home and found the slightly disheveled couch cushions, chose not to ask about. Today, an unrelated male in the house while a teenage girl is watching minors is grounds for immediate dismissal, possible criminal investigation, and the absolute end of her babysitting career. Subscribe to this channel if you ever, as a child of the 1970s, came downstairs in the middle of the night and walked in on something you were not supposed to see because that specific universal experience belongs to a system that no longer exists. Number 6. She left the house. Around 10 p.m., the babysitter realized the family was out of cigarettes, or out of soda, or out of something, and she decided to walk to the 7-Eleven 3 blocks away to get more. And she did this, leaving 3 sleeping children alone in the house, with the front door unlocked for approximately 25 minutes. She did not call your parents. She did not lock the door. She did not check on the children before she left. She simply walked out, did her errand, and came back. This was so ordinary that babysitters did not even mention it later. Today, leaving children alone in a house for any duration, while the babysitter is paid to be there, is grounds for immediate firing and possible legal action. Number 7. She let you watch movies you were not supposed to watch. The babysitter, who was 16 and bored, did not enforce any of the rules your parents had carefully established about your television viewing. She let you stay up past your bedtime to watch the late-night horror movie. She let you watch The Exorcist. She let you watch Halloween. She let you watch Jaws at age 6. She did this because she wanted to watch it herself, and she could not be bothered to fight you about going to bed. You spent 20 years afraid of clowns, swimming pools, and basements as a direct result. Today, the babysitter who allowed a 6-year-old to watch R-rated horror would face serious consequences with the parents and possibly with the law. Number 8. She disciplined you physically. When you would not behave, when you refused to go to bed, when you hit your younger sister, the 1970s babysitter swatted you, smacked your hand, popped you on the bottom, or hit you with a wooden spoon. She was 16 years old and had grown up in a household where physical discipline was completely normal, and she applied the same standard to her babysitting work without giving it a second thought. Your parents, when informed, agreed with the babysitter that you had been disciplined appropriately. Today, a babysitter who physically struck a child she was hired to watch would face immediate firing, possible criminal assault charges, and the permanent destruction of her reputation in the neighborhood. Number 9. She ate everything in the refrigerator. The 1970s babysitter, who had not eaten dinner because her family ate at 5 and her shift started at 6, helped herself to whatever she could find in your refrigerator. A sandwich made with the good ham, the leftover lasagna that was supposed to be your father's lunch tomorrow, the last of the ice cream. Your mother, on returning home, opened the refrigerator, performed a quick inventory, sighed, said nothing, and added the missing items to the next grocery list. This was understood as part of the compensation. The babysitter who systematically ate her client's food today would be reviewed harshly, refused future work, and become a cautionary tale. Number 10. She charged 50 cents an hour, in cash, with no taxes paid, no records kept, and no contract of any kind. The economics of 1970s babysitting were entirely off the books. The babysitter was paid in cash, usually small bills handed over at the door when your parents got home, at rates that ranged from 50 cents an hour at the beginning of the decade to 75 cents by the end. No taxes were collected. No records were kept. No agency took a cut. There was no contract specifying duties or liabilities. The entire transaction was a handshake economy, operating outside of every framework that now governs paid childcare. Today, the gig economy babysitting platforms have replaced this with formal payment processing, tax reporting, terms of service, and liability insurance. And the cash-in-hand teenage babysitter is functionally extinct. Number 11. She fell asleep on the couch. By 11 p.m., having put the kids to bed and consumed your beer and your snacks, the 1970s babysitter routinely fell asleep on the living room sofa, fully clothed, with the television still on. and stayed asleep until your parents came home at 1 a.m. and gently woke her up. The house was, during this stretch, technically unsupervised. The children were technically unattended. A fire could have started. A child could have woken up sick. None of this ever seemed to occur to anyone, because the baseline assumption was that everything would be fine, and almost always, it was. Today, the discovery that a babysitter had been asleep for 2 hours of her shift. Number 12. She let you have ice cream and Coca-Cola for dinner. When your parents had instructed her to give you the leftover meatloaf for dinner, the babysitter, who was tired and lazy and herself 16, instead allowed you to eat a bowl of ice cream, a glass of Coca-Cola, and a sleeve of saltines because you whined and she did not want to deal with it. You loved her. You begged your parents to hire her again. They did. The babysitter who fed the children whatever they demanded, in defiance of explicit parental instruction, would today be reported to the parents on a nanny cam review and never hired again. Number 13. She gave you Benadryl to make you sleep. In a smaller percentage of cases, but a real one. The 1970s babysitter, who knew about a trick her own mother had used, gave you a small dose of Benadryl in your bedtime cup of milk to ensure that you fell asleep quickly and stayed asleep through her boyfriend's visit. The boundary between this behavior and outright drugging of children, viewed in retrospect, is uncomfortably thin. It happened. It happened more than anyone wants to admit. Today, a babysitter administering any medication to a child in her care without explicit parental authorization is a serious criminal offense. Number 14. She talked on the phone for hours. The household had one telephone mounted to the kitchen wall with a long curly cord. From 8 p.m. onward, the babysitter occupied that telephone, sitting on the kitchen floor with the cord stretched across the room, talking to her own friends about her own day, for 90 consecutive minutes. During this time, your mother could not call to check in because the line was busy. Your father could not reach the house in an emergency because the line was busy. The single channel of communication between the babysitter and the outside world was monopolized by the babysitter's social life. This was so universal that babysitters were sometimes selected based on which ones used the phone the least. The smartphone era has eliminated this specific situation, but the trust it represented, that the babysitter's entire personal phone life would take place from your kitchen for the duration of her shift, is gone. Number 15. She was responsible for an infant. At the upper end of the age range, 16, 17, the 1970s babysitter was routinely hired to watch infants under 1 year old, including newborns. She had no medical training. She had no CPR certification. She had no infant-specific instruction. She had perhaps watched her own younger siblings, which was considered sufficient qualification. Your parents handed her a 6-month-old at 7 p.m., explained when the next bottle was due, and drove to a wedding for 6 hours. The babysitter would, if the baby cried, perform the standard interventions, bottle, diaper, rocking, walking, drawn from her own life experience with no formal training of any kind. And here is where I want to hear from you. In the comments, tell me 2 things. The single most ridiculous thing your babysitter ever did, that you only realized as an adult was completely insane, and whether you ever, as a teenager yourself in the 1970s, were the babysitter. And what was the worst thing you did or saw on a shift that nobody has ever asked you about? Both. I'm reading every single one, and the people in this comment section remember things you have forgotten. So read theirs too. Number 16. She took you out of the house, on foot, without telling your parents. If she got bored, the 1970s babysitter sometimes walked the children, all 3 of them, ages 4, 6, and 8, to the playground 6 blocks away, in the dark, on foot, without leaving a note, and stayed there for an hour while smoking and talking to her friends who had met her there. Your parents, returning home at 10 p.m. to an empty house, found the note she had left on the kitchen table only after their initial panic, and the babysitter and children returned an hour later as if nothing had happened. Today, a babysitter who removed children from the home without explicit parental permission would face immediate firing and possible legal consequences. Number 17. She drove you somewhere in her parents' car. At 17, the 1970s babysitter had her driver's license. and on more occasions than anyone wants to admit, she put you and your siblings into her father's borrowed Chevy and drove you to the Dairy Queen, or to the drive-in, or to a friend's house, or simply around town. She had no car seats. She had no booster seats. She had no infant restraints. She had a license that was 4 months old. Your parents, when they found out, asked whether you had fun. Today, transporting children in a vehicle is regulated by an enormous body of state and federal law that the 1970s babysitter would have violated on every single count. Number 18. She let you do things that were genuinely dangerous. The 1970s babysitter, who was not a particularly cautious person, let you ride your bike to the corner store at age 7. She let you climb the apple tree in the backyard at age 6. She let you light sparklers at age 5. She let you swim in the neighbor's pool, unsupervised, while she sat on the deck reading a magazine. She had a much higher tolerance for physical risk than your parents would have had, partly because she was a teenager and partly because nobody had taught her to think of children as fragile. The risk tolerance baseline of the entire decade was different, and the babysitter inherited it. Number 19. She told you secrets she was not supposed to tell. The 1970s babysitter, alone with a 6-year-old who was asking questions, did not have the modern script about what was and was not appropriate to discuss with a child. She told you casually the truth about Santa Claus. She told you what death actually was. She told you what her boyfriend had said to her. She told you the gossip about the neighbor down the street. She gave you information that was completely above your developmental level, and you absorbed it, and your parents found out about it later in fragments, and they were horrified, and they hired her again the next Saturday because the alternative was not going out at all. Number 20. She read your parents' mail and went through their drawers. The bored 1970s babysitter, alone in a strange house for 6 hours, did exactly what any 16-year-old in a strange house for 6 hours would do. She explored. She opened your father's desk drawer and read his letters. She opened your mother's jewelry box and tried on a necklace. She read the medical bills on the kitchen counter. She looked in the closet of the master bedroom. She knew, by the end of a typical shift, things about your family that your closest relatives did not know. She told nobody, but she knew. The complete absence of surveillance in 1970s households meant the babysitter operated in a kind of total privacy that the modern smart home era has eliminated. Number 21. She fell down the stairs and broke her wrist, and you took care of her until your parents got home. Babysitters, like everyone else, occasionally had accidents while on duty. In 1976, when the babysitter slipped on the basement stairs while taking the laundry down, a chore she had not been asked to do but was doing voluntarily, and broke her wrist, the 8-year-old in her care held a bag of frozen peas to her arm, called the neighbors using the phone number on the refrigerator, and stayed calm until your parents returned at midnight. The babysitter went to the emergency room with your father. Your father paid the medical bill because there was no insurance question and no liability lawsuit and no assignment of fault. The accident was simply something that had happened. Today, the same scenario would result in workers' compensation claims, lawsuits, insurance disputes, and the end of every babysitting arrangement in the neighborhood. Number 22. She let you play with the dog in ways that today would be considered abuse of either the child or the dog. The 1970s babysitter, watching a 5-year-old and a Labrador, allowed them to roll around on the living room carpet, pull each other's tails and limbs, sleep on the same dog bed, eat from the same bowl, and engage in approximately 100 behaviors that would today be flagged on social media by either dog rescue advocates, child safety advocates, or both. The dog was unharmed. The child was unharmed. The babysitter saw no reason to intervene. Today, any of these behaviors recorded on a nanny cam would generate concerned phone calls from the parents within minutes. Number 23. She told you to figure things out yourself. When you came to her with a problem, a broken toy, a fight with your sibling, a scraped knee, a lost item, the 1970s babysitter, who had a 16-year-old's tolerance for whining, told you to figure it out yourself. Not cruelly, not punitively. As a standard response, the expectation that a child should be able to handle minor problems independently was so deeply embedded in the culture that the babysitter inherited it without thinking. You figured the problem out, or you gave up, or you waited for your parents, and either way you developed a small piece of competence. Today, the babysitter is expected to engage with every minor distress, validate every emotion, and produce a positive outcome on every request. And the babysitter who told a child to figure it out herself would be considered cold and possibly negligent. Number 24. She had no way to reach your parents in an emergency. Your parents were at a restaurant, then a friend's house, then maybe a bar. They had left the phone number of the restaurant on a piece of paper on the kitchen counter, but they had also moved on from that location by 9 p.m., and the second number was, in fact, not written down. From approximately 9 until they got home, your parents were unreachable. The babysitter, in the event of a genuine emergency, would have called the police, called the neighbors, or called her own mother. She would not have been able to reach your parents until they walked through the door. This was so completely normal that nobody considered it a problem, and the modern expectation of instant parental availability via cell phone has erased the very concept of being temporarily unreachable. Number 25. She brought her own younger siblings with her. In some neighborhoods, the 1970s babysitter, who had been responsible for her own younger siblings since she was 8, simply brought them with her to her babysitting job. The arrangement turned a household with 3 children into a household with 5 or 6 children, all under the loose supervision of one teenager, in a house where the parents had not been informed of the additional head count. The babysitter saw no problem. The children played together. Nothing went wrong. Your parents, when they realized, simply paid her the same rate and asked her not to do it again. Today, a babysitter who arrived with 3 additional unauthorized children would be sent home immediately. Number 26. She left no record of anything that happened during the shift. When your parents returned home and asked how the evening had gone, the babysitter said it had gone fine. There was no written log. There was no daily report. There was no app-generated summary of the evening. There was no nanny cam footage to review. The entire history of the shift existed only inside the babysitter's memory, and she was 16 and tired and was already mentally rehearsing how she would spend the $7 she was about to be paid. Whatever had actually happened during those 6 hours, the fights between the children, the moment she fell asleep, the boyfriend's visit, the missing beer, the explored drawers, existed only in her head and the imperfect heads of the children involved. Today, the typical babysitting arrangement generates a detailed app-based record, time-stamped photographs, and a written summary of every meal and every diaper change. And the complete absence of documentation that defined the 1970s system is unimaginable. Number 27. She handled situations that should have required an adult. The 1970s babysitter, alone with a 6-year-old who developed a fever of 103 at 9 p.m., did not panic and did not call your parents. She gave you children's Tylenol, put you in a cool bath, called her own mother for advice, monitored you for an hour, and you got better. The next-door neighbor's house caught fire at 10. She called the fire department, woke the children, and walked all 3 of you outside in your pajamas to watch from the curb. The cat got hit by a car. She found a box, put the cat in it, called the emergency vet number, and dealt with what happened next. She was 16 years old, and she handled medical situations, emergencies, and small crises that today would result in immediate parental notification and possibly emergency services. She handled them because there was no one else, and she had been raised to handle things. Number 28. She was deeply trusted by your parents, despite all of the above. Here is the thing that is hardest to explain to anyone under 45. Your parents knew, on some level, that the 1970s babysitter would smoke, would drink some beer, would let her boyfriend visit, would take liberties with the rules, would fall asleep, would let you watch the late movie. They knew it, and they hired her anyway, and they were not bad parents. They were operating within a culture in which a certain amount of teenage misbehavior in adult substitute roles was understood, tolerated, and built into the price. The trust that made the whole arrangement possible was not naive. It was a calibrated trust, based on the assumption that nothing catastrophic would happen, and almost always nothing did, and that the slight slippage from perfect care was simply the cost of getting out of the house for an evening. Number 29. She, in turn, was building a kind of competence that has now disappeared. Here is what the 1970s babysitter by 16 had done. Managed 3 children for 6 consecutive hours, multiple times. Handled at least one minor medical situation. Resolved at least one fight between siblings. Cooked at least one meal. Operated independently in a house she did not know. Made decisions under pressure with no adult available. Earned her own money. Negotiated her own working conditions. By the time she was 18, she had several thousand hours of real responsibility on her resume. Responsibility that translated directly into competence at college, at her first job, at her own eventual marriage and parenthood. The modern teenager, hyper-supervised and never given comparable independent responsibility, arrives at adulthood without this preparation. And we have noticed the gap, and we have not figured out what replaces what the 1970s babysitting system was quietly producing. Number 30. And here is the one that explains why the entire system collapsed. The 1970s babysitting arrangement worked because of 2 specific cultural facts that are no longer true, and the entire structure depended on both of them. The first was that the neighborhood functioned as a continuous web of mutual surveillance and assistance. Every adult on the street knew every other family, every child, every car, in every driveway. The babysitter was not really alone. She was inside a dense human network in which any genuine emergency would have been answered by half a dozen neighbors within minutes. The second was that teenagers were, by cultural assumption, considered competent, capable of handling responsibility, of making decisions, of dealing with crises. The babysitter rose to meet the trust placed in her because the entire culture had been training her since the age of 7 to be a competent person. When both of those facts disappeared, when neighborhoods atomized into isolated households that no longer knew each other, and when the cultural assumption about teenage competence flipped from default yes to default no, the babysitting system stopped working, and not because the rules changed. The rules changed because the system stopped working. We did not regulate babysitting more heavily because we became more cautious. We became more cautious because the conditions that made the casual system safe had vanished beneath us. And we noticed, and we built a new system of certifications and apps and background checks and liability insurance to replace what had been quietly held in place by the neighborhood itself. The new system is, in important ways, safer. It is also vastly more expensive, vastly more anxious, and incapable of producing the kind of competence the old system produced as a side effect. The babysitter we have today is not better than the babysitter of 1976. She is also not worse. She is a different kind of worker, operating inside a different kind of contract, producing a different kind of childhood. We made an exchange. We did not understand the full terms. By the time we understood them, the babysitter we used to be, the 16-year-old with a beer and a boyfriend and 3 sleeping children and total responsibility, had been legislated, regulated, and culturally outlawed into a memory that nobody talks about, because the people who lived it assumed nobody was interested. There are about 40 million Americans alive right now who were either the babysitter or the children of the babysitter or the parents who hired her in 1976. Many of you are all 3 at different points in your own lives. Most of you have never been asked to describe what the system actually looked like from the inside. Most of you assume nobody is interested. You are wrong. The people who come after you cannot imagine that the system existed, and they need to know, because the loss of it is part of why their own lives feel the way they feel, and they cannot name what is missing. So name it. In the comments, tell us the one thing your babysitter did, or the one thing you did as a babysitter, that captures the entire vanished arrangement better than anything else. The single specific memory that, if you described it to a parent today, would end with a call to the police. Tell us, because you are the last people who remember the system from the inside, and when you stop telling us, the memory of what it meant to trust a 13-year-old with everything you loved will be gone for good. Subscribe if you were one of them. Share this with someone you babysat for or who babysat you in 1976, and I will see you on the next one.